Okay, so our next speaker is Dr. Suriani Suratman. Dr. Suriani is a senior lecturer at the Department of Malay Studies, the National University of Singapore. Her research focuses on gender relations, inequalities in Malay families and households, Malay ethnic identity, and the reproduction of portrayals of Malays. She told me to keep it short, so this is the abridged version. But otherwise, she's very accomplished. Of Javanese descent, Dr. Suriani is also an accomplished ceramic artist who honed her craft with cultural medallionist Iskandar Jalil. She has also held leadership roles in the National Heritage Board and the Malay Heritage Foundation. So may I now invite Dr. Suriani to speak on uncovering cultural heterogeneity of Malay peoples in Singapore. Dr. Suriani, please.
Thank you very much, Sean, for that introduction. Did say abridged, but that's already, more than the abridged version. So I first would like to thank Juliana very much, for putting this together and for inviting me to do this presentation. I didn't know what I was in for. Well, actually, I sort of know, she was saying, can you moderate, the sessions, the panels, that we're going to have. And I said, okay, moderation, I think I can do that. But along the way, it expanded. It expanded to the extent that, oh my goodness, now I have to give a presentation. But it has given me an opportunity to go back to some of the things that I was interested in as a student, a graduate student, looking at what it means to be Malay in Singapore. So initially, I called my presentation, or I wanted to talk about cultural heterogeneity of Malay peoples. I changed that because I wanted to, I changed it to Orang Melayu, in Singapore, because I wanted to move away from that term Malay, in the way that it is used, from the translation of Melayu to Malay, and also the kinds of assumptions, that are attached, to this term Malay, in a way that also Vivienne had covered out. Actually, Vivienne, thank you very much, that you went before me, because, it allows, it brought to stage some of the things that, I want to follow up on that. So, for me, one of the assumptions that I want to move away from is how Malay is being defined, and I will elaborate on this shortly through that term Melayu. Okay, so next slide, please. Yeah, who are Orang Melayu Singapore of Singapore? So actually, this is a slide that I show to my students when I teach the course Being Malays in Singapore. And so when I ask the question, and the students who read this course are not only Orang Melayu, but many other students from who are non-Melayu. Okay, so the way they answer it is over the years, and I've thought for a long time already. I won't say how long in NUS. Decades. So the answer over the years was similar. They would say, Orang Melayu are those who speak Malay, are Muslims, and practice Malay customs. Well, it is not surprising after what Vivienne had shown us, in the sense of how Malay is constitutionally defined. It's not surprising also when you know what students in schools learn, under that big, umbrella of social studies, right? And so actually, the course that I was teaching, Being Malays in Singapore, was one of those courses at the tertiary level that come under this big, umbrella of social studies and what we need to learn about Singapore society. Okay, so in that kind of definition, it's not surprising that it's like that. But when I ask them, so would you include yourself in the, or call yourself, right, in the category of Orang Melayu? Some would clarify, as we heard also just now from Nora, my IC states Malay, but I come from mixed marriages, yeah? And so, not really, Malay, I have mix of this and that, yeah? So, and it's a range, yeah? It's a range of mix, yeah, of different, how do you call it, identities, ethnic identities. For myself, when asked, if and when asked that question, I would say that I am Orang Melayu, and depending on the context, I would elaborate and say I'm Orang Melayu from Singapore, especially in when I go to Indonesia, and then they, and especially when I speak Bahasa Indonesia, and then they will say to me, "Kok bisa ngomong Bahasa Indonesia?" And then when they find out what my name is, Orang Jawa. So I cannot run from that, from the name and how I speak. Yeah, then I will say, yeah, kakek neneknya dari Jawa. Yeah. So I explain the link, and again, depending how long that conversation goes on, I would also then add that my maternal great grandmother had some Orang Laut blood. Okay, so I think it's okay. It is a choice. It is context, yeah. And what it is that that context, yeah, is important. So yeah, thank you. So in this in this context of Malay category being, crystallized, yeah, in a certain way through that rubric of CMIO, Chinese, Malay, Indian, and other, and this is something I also say in my class. What is other? An other race? I don't know. I don't know what that race is. Okay, the kinds of details that we hear today, we heard just now. It's very interesting, it's exciting, and I think also very important. Okay? And it reminds me of this book by Joel Kahn, an anthropologist, who says that, well, you can't you don't have to scratch the surface of a Singapore Malay very deeply, not at all. It's also at that surface level that you find that there's all these mixtures, yeah, that I think we carry with us from the past. So what I'm going to be doing today, next slide, thank you, is actually something simple. I thought it was simple, and that was to look at a particular peribahasa, a Malay proverb, which is, I'll say it Malay first, serumpun bagai serai, seikat bagai sirih. Okay, so it talks about, the peribahasa is about of the same root, implying that there is a Melayu serumpun of the same root, whilst, when we listen to everyone just now, we can also observe, yeah, cultural heterogeneity amongst Malays. So this is what I'm going to be covering, and I hope I can do it in good time. Next. So just to start very quickly, I thought I should say how, I understand culture, how I make sense of culture. I see it in terms of these two aspects, put very simply, of course, sociologists and anthropologists will try and will have other ways of defining it. Basically, it's about material aspects of culture. That means ways of doing things, yeah? And that includes, of festivities, what you eat, what kind of houses you build, yeah? Those are observable, very tangible in that sense. But there's also the non-material aspects of culture. That's ways of thinking. How we think about making sense of our social interactions with people, with the physical environment, natural environment. How do we deal with this? And this is ways of thinking. So if you think in terms of food, we don't just eat anything in that sense, especially when it is in a special festivity, marriage, during a marriage, weddings, right, and so on. There are ways of thinking that tells us, well, this is how you need to, what kinds of food you need to present to your guests. Otherwise, it may not be complete. Yeah. So the other thing I want to define here and clarify is about cultural practices. As you can see here, that it's tied with the ways of doing and ways of thinking. But what I want to stress is, the everyday things that we do, yeah, can be considered cultural practices. But in that broader sense, it's not fixed. We talked about fixing a category, a name, a definition to a category. So culture also is not fixed. It cannot be fixed because it's if you fix it, then you are not able to adapt, yeah, to changing environments. And how much do we know about changes, yeah, that is happening around us? So I hope, and this is something to do with cultural heterogeneity, which is what I want to talk about. And this is, in a way, an extension of, by going back in time, about categories, ethnic categories in our population census. So if we go back to the time of during colonial administration, and I add here that to administrate, yeah, any colonial administrators need to gather facts about something, or even us. When you want to administrate, you need to know what is out there. So population census is that site. At one level, you will see, yeah, these diversities, but the intention, yeah, of colonial administrators, when they collect information about the various communities that were in British Malaya at that time, was actually to categorize, classify, and control. Control in terms of deciding, okay, if you are in this category, this is what you can access. You are allowed to access. It's about accessibility of resources. And so you jolly well must know who you are in that regard, and must know which category you want to belong. Because if you're not at that top layer, right, this is how the rest of the communities, yeah, during the time of British administration in Singapore, you are being divided. Look at that category at the end: military, Indian, prisoners, local or transmarine. So these are, it's curious, right? I mean, is this a population census of race? That says a lot about, in terms of the understanding that, if you are prisoners, at which level you are at in that hierarchy, yeah, of races. So in this sense, we need to know what is the intention, right, of this population census. So following that, I wanted to look at how, the Malay category has been defined. Okay, so I took a look at earlier census, and this is one in 1966 and the other in 1970. And I guess, when you take a look at this, what is clear is that the heterogeneity of that category, of that sub-ethnic category, and how Malays are being then divided, change over time. Vivienne was talking about how categories are being defined and how people are categorized. But I think what is interesting here is from by going back to population censuses, from the 1980s, there were no breakdown of these sub-ethnic categories. It was Malay, all right? So when you see something like that on paper, you only think of this category, Malay, that is condensed, condensed, that is simplified in a way, and then also then crystallized in our minds when we look at this, at the census reports. But at the everyday levels, and we were talking about that, about what happens then when people leave. At the everyday level, it's not so condensed. I did a research in Clementi Housing Estate at that time for my MA thesis, and looking at what it's like being Malay in a housing estate. This is the 1980s. Singapore would have gone through second phase of industrialization. Okay, so in my conversations with the research participants, they distinguish, distinguish and tell me that, well, so and so is orang Jawa, or so and so is orang Melaka, or orang Johor. Sometimes they will say, oh, dia orang Pulau, right, from the island, or sometimes even orang Laut. Okay, so all these namings, right, that is used is a way to understand, and also get, in a sense, how do I interact with this person from orang Laut, or this person from orang Johor, and so on. But what they tell me then was that it's not homogeneous, right? I mean, the category Malay is not homogeneous, and that is diverse. I think I need to rush, right? Yeah. Okay. It's only the introduction, but I promise that the rest will be very, very, very fast. So the last slide here is about ethnicity, and I don't want to, you can look through that, but this ethnic identities, are in a sense contextual. It depends on the context. But also, what is important here is about the context of wanting to distinguish us from them. And there's context that requires that. In a context where a certain definition, as I said earlier on, allows you to access certain resources, then it becomes very important, to know how you want to define yourself, and what are then the boundary markers, the markers that you want to use to delineate yourself from others, in order that you can access resources. I've defined resources very big. I will be more specific in a short while. Okay. So now then, if the category Malay is so condensed, and I said, you have, expressions of heterogeneity at the everyday level. What do you see at the national level? So there is encouragement. There is, in fact, more and more we are seeing, statements and also platforms that encourages or inviting, for us, to think about our the diversity of Singapore society, and thinking about our heritage that is diverse. So here, it's about customs and traditions, but with an intention. Why? Because we need to have a deeper understanding in order that when we to appreciate, each other, and ensure, and ensure social harmony. I mean, in that kind of, in one breath, it's expressed in that way. At another level, and here I'm talking about institutions. This is Malay Heritage Center series, Ser Nusantara, or of one archipelago. So this was a series that was of exhibitions that was organized, by Malay Heritage Center, and I was very happy at that point in time. I was one of the board member of the Malay Heritage Foundation, and learned quite a lot from these varying ethnic communities that we find in Singapore. And some of you would remember and was maybe a part of these series of exhibitions that celebrate the cultural history and heritage of these groups. The book came out, right? So that series came out as a book, right? Recently, I think 2022, in a book, titled Ser Nusantara, Our Stories, A Shared History, or Cerita Kita, Warisan Bersama. Now, what about at other levels of society? So at the community level, I'm giving just examples of associations, and it is just only one example, which is the Persatuan Bawahan Singapura, established as far back as 1934. There are, of course, other associations that include a Javanese Association of Singapore that was established in 2015, and the Singapore Minangkabau Association in 1994. Okay? So they're not the only ones. You can look up and find out. But I think a more recent one here is oranglaut.sg. I'm sure everyone is familiar with that, who were, mainly tracing the memories and heritage of people who were living in Pulau Semakau, and tracing their heritage through food. They also organized Hari Orang Pulau last year, I think in June, last year in June, I think, to celebrate, again, culture, heritage, and stories, of Singapore's Orang Pulau. So going back then to, you see these diversities and all that, I want to, so I'm very intrigued by this peribahasa, as I pointed out just now, seikat bagai sirih, serumpun bagai serai. In terms, I'm intrigued by it because of this expression, of oneness, as well as the recognition, of difference. It signals possibilities, of how we want to, relate, to one another. So where are these articulations? And I'm finding it in a few sites. Let me give you just very quickly an example. So Kita Serumpun is actually under this group called Impact Malaysia, which is under the purview of Ministry of Youth and Sports in Malaysia. And the purpose is to empower youths through sports and media, provide them with learning resources, platforms, as well as content. And here is one of the events that they have organized. And Kita Serumpun means of the same roots, and looking at samping, di negeri Asia Tenggara, looking at that piece of cloth that most men wear, over their baju kurung, across Southeast Asia. Another example is this event called Gemas. So Gemas is like cute or adorable, like that word itself, but it also stands for, the Indonesians are very good at this, really good. So Gelar Melayu Serumpun. so call ourselves Melayu Serumpun, and we of the same roots. So it's actually a cultural festival that's held at Medan, showcasing Malay arts and traditions. And in fact, if you're curious what it's going to be like, it's on in June, so not too late. At 20, I think it says here somewhere 25th or 26th of June. So Gamas is one example. Of course, serumpun, kita serumpun, can be used in different ways. I apologize for the small words there, but it was used in the context, in a particular context by our Prime Minister, again to talk about oneness, of coming together and how important it is to be seikat, to be united in the context of what we are facing today in today's world. One last slide with serumpun. I wanted to really play that song, but I thought it would be distracting, that I won't go on. Everyone will be dancing along and sing along. So Mimi Fly she's a singer, songwriter, comes from Kedah, and she's made herself very well known as in a solo career. And so she came up with this Hari Raya song very recently, which caught a lot of attention for some reason or other. I mean, I'm not going to elaborate that, but she had this chorus, of the Serumpun, the song called Serumpun. And here, look at that. Oh, bagai serai kita serumpun, bagai sirih kita. Bagai sirih tersusun. It's the order. Okay, so these are examples of something that has come up, very recent but also very strongly, and I'm seeing it more and more. I mean, and you can just count. Now, how to explain it? So I'm going to, be very quick and fast because I have not very much time. It's about looking at being maritime. I'm going back in time to try and understand or make sense of this phrase that bagai sirih, serumpun, or this idea of Melayu serumpun. So I've used the book of Leonard Andaya, a historian, Leaves of the Same Tree, which also is quite similar to that idea, of Melayu serumpun. And so in trying to make sense, of why, how do we understand, this oneness, but also recognizing the differences. And for me, it's about being maritime. What does it mean to be maritime? We all know, that the movements of people in what we know as ala Melayu or Malay world, movements of people, goods, and ideas. But here he used, Andaya used this term, the Sea of Melayu. And the Sea of Melayu is referencing or used to refer, to a family of communities, very simply, but to refer, to this whole area, right? That it's not. I took it from his book, but it's not quite clear. But basically, it's from the Isthmus of Kra down to the Straits of Malacca and then up to South China Sea, but including the land, not only the sea, but the lands. So Sumatra, Peninsula Malaysia, and of course Singapore. So it's the idea of using that term Melayu, and what it entails. It may refer, to the sea. It may refer to a very physical site. And here I want to use that term, Bumi Melayu, which was actually preceding Alam Melayu. It's Sanskrit. Of course, it also means the world of Malay world. And how, within the context, of this Sea of Melayu, Andaya argues that you can see some signs, of commonalities. And one of the signs of commonalities is that language. And here again, we have to thank, historians, archaeologists, sociolinguists, and anthropologists who are able to join some dots together to tell us, yeah, there is, this Melayu language, and within this context, is that Melayu polity, which actually is known, for its relations, its connections amongst its the group, the communities, in this Bumi Melayu, right? And so the connections here, because of the sea and the land, right, meant that it had to be established in some way. And how this is done is through genealogy, through marriage. And marriage is the most, very important because it will expand your links and connections. But why are these links and connections are important? And here, Andaya stressed that it's because of international trade. And so networks become very important. And so the links, social relationships meant that you can have economic as well as political relationships. So marriage, in this regard, in Bumi Melayu, was one that is also, how do you say, it's bilateral. That means when you get married, you recognize both sides of the family, the fathers, the mothers, husbands, and wives, because if you don't, then you are one link short, and that's very, that means it's more extensive to recognize the mother's side and not only the father's side, because of the potential of that link can give in terms of having the economic relations, right? So here, actually the one before that, sorry. So here, what it means by being maritime is actually the sea and the importance of the land. Very often we say that, maritime means, the sea is important, but I think you need to include the land, because tanah seberang laut, or the land beyond the sea, is important, because that is also a site for economic opportunities. I like the word also tanah air to refer to homeland, where both tanah and air becomes very important here in the understanding within the Bumi Melayu of what matters, for them. Yeah. So next slide. Yeah. So here, if I go back to this point about defining ourselves, our ethnic identity, and choices that we can have, or what choice are we afforded, right, within certain contexts. Andaya's argument is this, and I like to read this, that many individuals who decided to identify with new ethnic communities in the process of moving or merantau, from one place to another, from upland to lowland to the coast, from hulu to hilir, right? I mean the upper river and down, from one land to another land across the sea. They moved, to these new places, and maybe acquired these identities, but they never totally abandoned the Melayu between, in these movements. And, but what is important is why you went and why you choose, had to do with the greater advantage under specific circumstances. I can't elaborate here in the interest of time, but, if you have questions, you can ask. So I just want to offer, so how can we, what do we need to do here, right? Or what can we learn from this past? our ancestors in the past in that period of time, and understand, how open definitions could be, how it is not fixed, these choices, that were that are given to them. So and this is taken from a Martinican poet, Edouard Glissant, who talks about a rhizome identity. And the closest example I can think of in Bumi Melayu is the hadia ginger, right? It grows, through the shoots, with nodes, and then in the ground, in the ground you don't see it. Yeah, but off the ground, you see a shoot coming up. But these are nodes from the main node, and roots spread out, and wherever the nodes grow from. Expanding the roots, deep, but also the shoots, are coming up. So, but they're connected. They're connected in the way of not just by one root, but all these offshoots. So imagine, what that means, what that entails. So this is what Glissant was trying to say. Like, you don't need to fix it into just one lineage, right? Because it doesn't have to be. He wanted to, expand on this idea of diversity. He wanted to expand on the idea of relations. And here, in that extensiveness, the one thing that I would like to share also at this point is a quotation by Walt Whitman, and I want to thank Faiza Jamal for introducing Whitman to me in one of our conversations, and who said, and let me quote, "Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes," and we all have that, And when you are going to be searching your ancestors and finding out the past, you are going to be a multitude of many, many things that can be at some point contradictory, conflicting, but also very, very important, at other points. I want to end with this last slide. In terms of asking the question, why does it matter? In 2022, I was very fortunate to be invited in an exhibition titled "Between the Living and the Archive." If you cancel that word "between the" and the other and the, it is about living archives. So I want to push this idea, push this idea that each and every one of us, are living archives. We are embedded with so much information. We are archives, and we must be archivists. Somebody said that, he feels that it's his duty. It's his duty. Yes, we have this responsibility or amanah to find out these stories, this information that we have, but not in just one direction, but in the various possible directions that one can go through, in order for us, to learn, about ourselves, and the past. So for me, searching our ancestors is not only about the past and the present. It's about weaving this together for the future. It's important for me to pass down some of these recipes that I learned from my grandmother, great-grandmother, grand-aunt, and aunt, and my mother to my son, so that he can come up with new recipes, new narratives for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suriani, for that thoughtful and very meaningful presentation. Hey, don't run away, huh? You have to answer Q&A. No, not finished yet. Huh? So we have some time for questions, about 20 minutes. Yes. Would you like to take a seat? Yeah. So who would like to ask the question? We have about 20 minutes, so I hope we can stick to the time. But feel free, yes. Who's the first brave soul? Oh, in front?
Thank you so much, Dr. Suriani. That was a beautiful conversation you had with all of us. And just to share with you, I think we're a rhizome haka at the moment. And I love the idea that we are lateral. We don't think of things as linear. Tanya representing the Cheti Malacca Indian Peranakan Association. So I want to just add that I think we've lost a lot in language, because as we go around and we speak these different dialects, in the dialects, like in your example of poetry, we lose understanding and meaning. So I think in our schools, we've tended to go along the road of Malay language and Mandarin language, but we miss out on the nuances. So I think we should go back to learning our dialects, all our dialects. What do you think?
I think those, the nuances are, of course, very, very, very important, right? It's not about, like Malay language and all that. I mean, like, what do you call it? English is so dominant in our lives, and this brings me back to the point in time where I had to decide, or my husband and I, were deciding for our son, what language. His mother tongue, right? His identity card, by the way, is Eurasian. My husband is German, and so and that's what it is, right? What is afforded to you, and even with the double barrel identity, you have to at some point decide which comes first before the other. That's very important too. So anyhow, because he's Eurasian, and I wanted, or both of us wanted very much for him to take Malay in school, I had to sign something to say that I take full responsibility for my decision, for my son to learn Malay language, because it is not his mother tongue. And of course, you can tell, you can see how I'm rolling my eyes, and saying, mother tongue? His mother tongue is Malay, and we made very sure, we intentionally brought him up first in the two languages that we think are important for him, Malay and German. And this was because we were in Germany, and well, I think it's important, because how do you communicate in a society where, English is not the main language, right? So German and Malay. And when we went to Sabah for 2.5 years to teach at University Malaysia Sabah, English became dominant. In 2 weeks, he was just speaking English, and I said, bahasa Melayu, please. Cakap bahasa Melayu. And my husband was like, sprich Deutsch, bitte. So it's that kind of struggles, right? So I think it's a challenge. I think it's important because the nuances are important and they get lost in translation. But I think, you need effort. I mean, you have to push through it. English is still the dominant language for him, but he speaks German, he speaks Malay. Not he doesn't have certificate, a language certificate, but he has this, and I think that's important. Whether
Okay, any questions? Yes. Over there.
Good morning to all. Mike's my name. I'm not Singaporean, I'm just a visitor here. Very interesting to hear these two presentations. I think Dr. Vivienne, the previous one, I think perhaps my comment there would be that really the term Melayu, Malay is really another construct from the colonial times. It's just, the divide and rule concept which you referred to as well. The other comment I have, particularly on your presentation, is that it's interesting to see that, we're searching for our roots. Really, it's probably an innate quality in us as human beings to want to know where we come from. I think it's built into our genes. It's possibly an analogy would be akin to salmons, salmon swimming out there in the vast oceans. They would come back to the little stream. They somehow is built in their genes to come back to the little stream to know where they come from. And that's, I think, possibly the creators built into our own genes that same quality to want to know. Is our personal desire to know where we come from. So possibly, and you can see that there is, although society or the controlling power wants to mask you as one particular group or race, in this case Melayu or Malay, I think it's very, very artificial, because as you show there are various subdivisions. And possibly the question would be, are they really Malays by definition, or was it Malays because of the way they speak? They could originally be different languages in the past, but somehow, because Malay has become a lingua franca, and that language has been absorbed by these various subgroups who are then now categorized as Malays. So that's really an artificial construct of its own.
I'm looking at the corner there. We have a very, very good linguist, Professor Jeffrey Benjamin, who can actually answer your question in greater detail. But let me just address some things that you have just said about Melayu as the lingua franca. It was the lingua franca in Bumi Melayu. And of course, Alam Melayu, Bumi Melayu got changed to Alam Melayu at the point, with the coming of Islam. Bumi is Sanskrit and Alam is Arabic, right? But it means, it matters in terms of, different points in time. But what I wanted to say about Melayu as the lingua franca was that it was the language of trade. It was the language of governance, right? And diplomacy. It was so important that that even and this is from Andaya, that the courts in the Thai court made. He was very glad that he could send a convoy with one person who spoke Malay, and they could then speak to one another. But what does it mean here in as a lingua franca? Is that language for trade. You need to have a way to get to know, to speak to each other that means language as a tool of communication. But Andaya also found that, that actually the sea of Melayu and Bumi Melayu was bilingual, at least bilingual. That was that there were other languages, many other languages that, that were spoken, right? That in the everyday lives of people, that even Melayu was not immune to these languages. That means there are some words that come into Melayu a language, but there was also this problem of the time, during the point of the Achinese kingdom's reign, right? In the Melayu, in Alam Melayu, where there were some complaints when Achinese, the Aceh words came into the Melayu language, and the complaints came from peoples in Borneo because they say we don't understand. 17th century, right, records, and saying can you please make sure that there are terms that we understand? If you put into many of these other languages, we may not understand. So it's understanding that, of course, it's navigating, the context and the situation, and so it goes back to the point of the porosity of terms, of boundaries as well. You can erase them. You can draw them and darken it also, or you can bend them a bit. That sort of thing. But I think.
Since you just mentioned my interest in linguistics, I do teach Malay linguistics. A statistic that I start the courses with is that only 14% of the people who speak the Malay language every day in their lives are actually ethnic Melayu, orang Melayu. For the simple reason Malay includes Bahasa Indonesia.
It's a little bit more complicated than that, however. Malay is also very like English in its dual history. English began as a speech of a tiny portion of the British Isles a long time ago. Now look where the English language is. It's historically spread way beyond that. Malay did that earlier, in fact, than English did, and it got picked up because of all the shipping passing through the narrow straits of Malacca, on both sides of which there really were people speaking what you might call real original Malay, which incidentally started in Borneo, not in the peninsula of Sumatra, and then became a trade language, and in some cases deposited itself in local varieties of Malay in places like eastern Indonesia, where they have their own very strangely different varieties of Malay, Ambon, Ternate, places like that. They're not Malays. The people are definitely not Malays in any useful cultural or identity sense, but Malay is their first language. And then along comes Bahasa Indonesia, which they have to study in school, and they find a big difference between what they thought was Malay and so on. It's a very complicated situation. So Malay is historically very like English in some of its historical, the story of its historical spread.
Thank you, Jeffrey, because the complexities, is really very clear in different languages, and it really reminded me of the time when I had to decide where I want to do my research for my PhD. I wanted to initially do research in the Philippines, thinking that, okay, I think I can learn Tagalog. But after having to learn German, I mean, that was the requirement then in the university, it was so difficult for my brain to take that. So I'd say, okay I'll do the same topic, but I'll do it in Kedah, Malay, Peninsula, Melayu, right? I mean, and you can speak, I won't have problems with the language. I don't have to learn another language, so I thought. Kedah Malay is so different, and then because of the borders with Thailand, oh my goodness, it wasn't easy. But I mean, it's like what you say. I mean, like there are many of these, can you call it dialects or different dialects, right? Yeah.
Mr. Liu, can we let the gentleman in the back go first? He's been waiting for some time. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Dr.
Please.
Suriani. Thank you for your presentation. I like the fact that you put the rhizomes and also the serumpun, right? So in my quest for looking for my, I guess, ancestors, I couldn't find them in Java. But what we did was we had groups of Javanese from different parts of the world, like in Netherlands, Suriname, Singapore, Malaysia, and even Indonesia. So what we did was we got together and then we did biannually, I mean, every 2 years we meet in Java, and then we talk about how we are going to find our relatives or our ancestors and what our shared ancestry and how we have developed over the years. So it's like when you say that the rhizome is growing laterally, but these were cut and brought to different places. And then the Javanese has this term called gumpu ke balung pisah, gathering the bones that have been dispersed. So we gather them together in Java. And then and the logistics of it is quite difficult because there were people who were speaking Dutch because the Dutch Javanese do not know how to speak Indonesian. And the Malays, the Malaysian and Singaporean Malays cannot speak Dutch or Sranan Tongo, which is the Surinamese, and the French Caledonian Javanese. So what we did was we depended on Javanese, but broken Moko Javanese, and we somehow got across our thoughts to each other. But I thought that this was a really good presentation with the serumpun and the sirih and also the rhizome. So I thought that was an excellent point to bring.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I don't think I will be a real Orang Jawa because I don't speak Javanese. Splattering of words, from my aunt who insists that we know some, words. And one of the things that still stays in my head is goboan. And so which is, like it's like a teapot and then, to wash your hands, right? So that was important because I was always in charge, in all these, when we have gatherings and all, then she would say, Su, ambil goboan. Then I was like, initially I was like, apa tu? Yeah, but I learned, I learned that. But thank you also for sharing, what you have done. And I like that the analogy of the rhizome, yeah, and how, like you see, you can cut it up and then, grow and more shoots, and then and the best thing is that it's lateral, right? Yeah.
Mr. Liu? Yeah.
In Singapore, we have the challenge of encouraging our younger generation to speak the mother tongue. That happened in Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. Based on the experience at NUS, who are actually interested in the Malay studies or particularly Malay language? And how would you promote the use of Malay language in families and maybe in a hawker center or in Singapore? And we can learn for the Chinese community and the Tamil community as well.
Thank you for that question. I don't make policies at the university, but I wish. I just to the question of who is interested, right, in Malay studies. It's very difficult to get people to be interested in Malay studies, but I have to say that the ones who are interested are very keen. They're keen and knowing that, with a degree and a qualification with a major in Malay studies, where would that bring one to? But it's that kind of thing. That it's like you do something. Why? Because it's for something else, not for the essence of wanting to learn the language. But we do have a center for language studies, and there are people who want to learn the Malay language because of research purposes, right, and all that. So the other levels of speaking Malay in other spaces, like I call it, like what it used to be or how I grew up, and where a Malay or a Patri Malay is in the is used in the market, where you speak Malay, to any want to ask where to go, where to go and all that, because it was a lingua franca. It was. I mean, it is still the national language of Singapore, but it's not taught in school anymore. I don't know when it stopped, but I knew when I was going to school long time ago in primary school that there is the subject national language, and we were taught Malay. I tell you, that was the best class, that I had, because it was so much fun learning Malay with other, everyone as a whole class. So I think it's at higher levels, but I also think that at the individual level, I think you need to create context. But of course, creating these contexts can be confined into family, like what I did with my son, and make sure that he knows some Malay. And I remember that I was bringing back CDs at that time, those kind of CDs from Singapore back to Germany, of Lat cartoons, of P. Ramlee songs, movies, and that was how I wanted him to hear. Having to learn German, in Germany, is about sounds. I think it's a very sonic experience, and so when you hear the sounds, then you can learn. I think faster. It's not quite answering the question, but I think we need to create these contexts. We need to be imaginative, in that sense, to create such context. It doesn't have to be through language. It can be through music, for example, songs. And I know that there are efforts, like youths of the Malay Society. At one point, they were organizing, song competitions for young people to sing songs, yeah, in Balinese. It's like a talent time, show. And in that process, learn the language.
Okay, and I'm afraid we have to close the Q&A. Please join me once again in thanking Dr. Suriani.